Welcome to season 3 of Burnout Banter. We're thrilled to be back and kicking off the season with a topic that we hope will resonate deeply with leaders in the construction industry and beyond. Burnout is a growing challenge as many of us are stretched thin, leaving leaders wondering how to better support their employees. In this episode, we're going to explore strategies for creating a burnout-proof workplace, drawing inspiration from Jessica Stillman's insightful article, How to Burnout-Proof Your Workplace According to Organizational Psychology. Make it smart. Her article is a summary of work completed by Sharon Parker, who has a doctorate of philosophy and psychology and is the director of the Center for Transformative Work Design and an ARC Laureate Fellow at Curtin University in Australia, and Carolyn Knight, who's a senior lecturer at the University of Queensland's Business School in Australia also. So getting some way down south influence on.
I have a little Australian influence. Let's do it.
Yeah, so we're going to break down the SMART framework. It's a practical, actionable approach that focuses on creating stimulating work, fostering mastery, encouraging autonomy, building relational connections, and maintaining tolerable demands. Our goal is to provide you with tools and strategies that can make a meaningful difference, not only in your professional life, but also in the lives of the people who make your business thrive. So whether you're on your morning commute, taking a lunch break, or unwinding after a long day, we're here to guide you towards a healthier, more balanced workplace. So let's dive in. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff,
And I'm Rochelle.
and this is Burnout Banter. Before we jump into today's episode, remember to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen so that you can stay up to date with the latest banter. So glad to be back, Rachelle. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Glad to say goodbye to 2024 and hello to 2025. I don't know about you, but there was some bad energy in 2024, and I'm really looking forward to getting rid of that this year.
Yeah, I mean, there was some. I think there was also some great things that came out of 2024.
Yes, yes.
Both of
It's
us.
always good and bad, but
Even though you're having a
160
hard
in
time seeing.
total.
Did you have a good holiday?
I did. I did. It was very, very low key, very full of family and food and fun. How's yours?
Yeah, low key would be how I would describe it, which was nice and needed.
Love it. Much, much needed for sure.
Yeah. So I think, what kind of caught me. So I was reading this article and I was like, ooh, we need to talk about this. And what caught my eye was some of the statistics at the beginning of it. So Society for Human Resource Management did a mental health survey in 2024, and they found that 45% of the workers who responded to the survey reported being burned out.
That feels very low to me.
Well, stay tuned
Okay.
because the American Psychology Association did a survey in 2023, which found that 57% of employees experience negative effects of burnout.
Getting
And
close.
Deloitte uh, actually found that 77% experience burnout at their current job in a recent survey.
This is closer to that 8 in 10 proposal professionals are burnt out statistic that we see often,
Yeah.
and the kind of rising post-pandemic burnout. So yeah, reading the article, I started like skeptical of that 45%, but as it crept up, I mean, 45% is still alarming, don't get me wrong, but it felt very low to
Do
me.
you think do you think that people understand, I know we're talking about burnout a lot more, but do you think people even understand what it is to be able to say, yes, I'm burned out or no, I'm not? That could potentially influence the survey results.
I think so. I think we talk about burnout a lot, so we're kind of mired in it and it's becoming more prevalent, like you said. But I still think there's a lot of miscommunication, misguidance around it. Like people would just think, oh, I'm just stressed right now, or oh, I just have a lot on my plate right now. So, but once I get through it, I'll be fine.
I don't like my job and
Yeah, like once I get a new job, everything will be great. I'm like, no, if
yeah.
you're burnt out, like that's not gonna, it might change things, but it might not solve them.
Yeah, and you're gonna fall back into the same habits that got you into the birthplace of burnout in the first place, even at a new job, and it may not happen right away, but it's going to happen at some point if you don't change.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of times as leaders or organizations, I get the sense that there's this perception that burnout is kind of an individual problem. Would you agree or disagree?
I agree. And I don't think it's just leadership. I think even in talking to individuals, it's still really common to hear someone say, like, oh no, I'm just stressed. And as they talk about their stress, I'm like, no, no, you're burnt out. And they're like, well, it's just me. Like I've put too much on my plate. But then when you dig a little bit deeper and you're like, well, who can you talk to about that? There's often not somewhere they can go. Like they're just expected to handle everything that's been given to them. That's not an individual problem. That is an organizational problem.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people internalize it, right, and think, well, what's wrong with me that I can't handle this?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
So I do think there's a personal component to burnout. But I also think there's definitely an organizational aspect to burnout too. And that's kind of what this article talked about, is how organizations can help employees avoid burnout.
I really appreciated that, especially because we see so many articles that are like, here's how to beat your burnout. Like, have a cup of tea and go meditate and take a nice bubble bath. I'm like, that's cool. That'll make me feel good for about 5 minutes. But all of this stress and all of this stuff is still waiting for me after that cup of tea. So really, really appreciate that we're looking at kind of the higher level, the root cause of burnout in this episode. I'm really excited to kick off the year and the season this way.
Yeah, so I think there's things that we do individually that contribute to our stress. And then there are things that our organizations do that contribute to our stress. And I think where people really struggle with burnout is when those two things get added together and it becomes too much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're super resilient creatures as humans, but we can only handle so much pressure from so many sources at once.
Yeah. So this SMART framework is trying to help organizations understand how they can better help their employees avoid burnout. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I think we've talked a lot about how people can avoid burnout in the past, but um, excited to dig into this. So the SMART framework, and the people I mentioned in the intro, Carolyn Knight and Sharon Parker, are both psychologists. So these framework is kind of rooted in organizational psychology and how to get people more engaged at work, because that's really what burnout is it's the opposite of engagement.
Right. Right. And we talk about that all the time. You disengage, you are 100% burnt out if you check out of work.
Yeah. Yeah, so the S stands for stimulating work. So providing some variety and meaningful challenges in tasks for people at work, encouraging personal growth and skill development, and then trying to help them avoid things that are overly repetitive or stagnant, because that repetition very quickly leads to burnout when you're doing the same thing over and over again.
This is why proposal managers
Oh,
on my side burn out a lot because proposals are the same thing over and over and over again. And so when someone comes to us and says, hey, can we put this together really quick? All we have to do is copy and paste. Like that's why we get so upset. One, because bad practice, not best practice. But two, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to just repackage the same document over and over. Like we want to be strategic, we want to be creative, we want to figure out like what the win is. So it's not an efficiency for leadership to try and shove another proposal onto our workload pile by saying, well, we can just copy and paste. That's a huge contributor to our burnout. That really, really struck me as I was reading the article. Like you
yeah,
don't
I mean,
grow that Anyone can copy and paste a document.
Yeah, I think it happens on the engineering side too, or architecture side. I see it all the time. As we work on a certain project type, we get to be really good at it. And there's this desire, right, to have your best people work on your projects. But I've seen where people get pigeonholed into the same type of project over and over again, how that can lead to burnout too. So, um, if there's not variety in the project, or somebody's not getting to learn something new or experience something new, yeah, you're just punching a clock every day and repeat, repeat, repeat. And I think people make mistakes that way, because they check out, they're not fully engaged in what they're doing. And so it can really have a negative impact on the business too if you don't have stimulating work.
Autopilot is the worst thing for business. I've done this a million times. Like I know how to do it. I'm guilty. Guilty. I've gone 15 years without submitting a non-compliant proposal. And then one day, because I've done it a million times, I missed a form. And everyone else did too. There were like 10 people on this proposal. We all missed the form. So we're human. It happens. But part of it is copy and paste. I've submitted the same proposal many times in the last 15 years, and it's rough. It's bad.
So what are some strategies or things you've seen people try that helps provide that stimulation?
I think you need to find a balance of that mastery and like the studio system within an architecture firm is interesting and cool because like you said, you know the ins and outs of this particular thing. I've seen a lot of companies do like cross-pollination or like thought leadership where they share lessons learned or like someone gets pulled into like a QA review or like gets to experience a piece of something else. So like maybe they're in the healthcare studio and then they go and they do a lessons learned or a lunch and learn or a QA review and get involved in like a government project. And I think like it just keeps them on their toes and gives them something new and it helps with that stimulation of, oh, like there's other stuff out there. Maybe I'm interested in this. Same thing happens for proposal professionals. Like you might be really, really good at federal government proposals, but sometimes it's nice to go put in like a private proposal to a developer or like submit something to Google because you can have fun and be creative and like the same rules don't apply. You don't have to do it every time, but it's just kind of a revitalization. So those little mini cross pollinations I've seen work really well.
I think getting to the root of why somebody does something also can really help with that stimulation. I've talked a lot about how engineering is not that stimulating for me. But if I'm able to connect it to what is stimulating for me, the people side of what I'm doing, then the engineering becomes stimulating. So I think it's trying to figure out what really drives each individual person and how do you tie what they're doing on a daily basis to what that stimulation is for them.
I love that. And that seems like it ties to our core values episode from season one, like understanding what people really care about and why they do what they do. Because we're, yeah, working for a paycheck, but many of us have chosen our career paths, at least somewhat intentionally. I'm going to say somewhat because every marketer I've ever known has fallen into this and then just like owned it.
Yeah.
But there's a reason that we owned it. There's a reason we stayed.
Yeah. And creativity could be a part of that for some people, or there could be other things, right? So finding ways to allow that creativity to come out, even though they're doing a repetitive task, could really push somebody's buttons and get them excited about what they're doing.
I love it. I love it. I just, before we move on, wanted to point out that in the article, the authors also mention a lack of personal growth in the stimulating work. And I feel like this is really common on the marketing side because there's often not like a path upward for us, and that's how we get stuck where we are, or that's why we start cycling through every like 12 to 24 months into a new job. And then, organizations suffer because that was a lot of institutional knowledge that just walked out the door. So I think in addition to really understanding what drives your staff, what drives your employees, as a leader, you also need to understand like what their ultimate goals are. Because no one wants to be a marketing coordinator for 20 years. Not that I've seen, at least.
I mean, yes, maybe not, but I have seen like engineers who just want to do engineering. And so then they get pushed into, project management or leadership or managing people, and they really have no interest in doing that. So, right, you've got to individualize that for each person, right? And
Of
help them
course.
get to go. Because I've made that mistake many times where it's like, oh, well, I want to do more, and so I think this person should want to do more, and they didn't, and so then we're creating,
I
now I've
didn't
put them
say more.
together.
I just said different. I was very intentional because I'm one of those people. I had no desire to move into a management or a director position, but I didn't have a path for growth as a marketing coordinator. It's just more proposals, right? So figuring out what that path was
Yeah,
would have shaped
I'm
me
with you.
in-house. Distinction.
So it's funny because the M, we just talked about how stimulating getting some variety in your life and mastering a certain project type over time can get boring for some people. Mastery is the second letter of this acronym. So, but I think it's not so much from mastering the role as it is understanding what I'm trying to achieve and why, and helping somebody get to the point where they feel like they're achieving that what and why.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to interject on that. I used mastery when we were talking about stimulating work, as in like mastery of this particular domain and content.
Yeah.
Very different from how the author and how Sharon Parker and Carolyn Knight present mastery in their work. It is very much not tied to I know everything about this type of project or this type of work. It is I can do this really well, and here's what I get out of it. Here's what the company gets out of it. Like you said, it's a sense of achievement, knowing that what you are doing has value, is meaningful, is very powerful. It's very empowering. It's very
Yeah.
motivating.
Yeah, you want to tie what they're doing to larger goals that the company's trying to achieve, or even outside of work, like what you're trying to achieve in your life, um, so that you feel like you're actually achieving something on a daily basis and working towards the greater good or the higher why.
Yeah, we talked about that in last year's New Year's episode, right? Like setting a New Year's resolution to get fit doesn't matter unless you understand why that means something to you, right? Like I want to be healthy because I want to be able to go hiking on vacation, not just because I want to start working out. Like that's not going to be enough. And that's the same thing for your work. Like I want to know that I'm putting together all of these proposals for a reason, that they are keeping the company and business, that they are keeping the people around me employed and happy. And like there needs to be more than just I'm copying and pasting documents and sending them out because that's soul sucking work and nobody wants to do that either.
Yeah, I mean, there are even I've mentioned about how you'd be given a project to work on, and it's like, well, okay, I'm not connecting the dots as to why this is an important project to work on. Is there a bigger client we're chasing, or is there a bigger project that we're chasing, or we're just trying to make our way into this market sector, and so you know without understanding that why, and even if the why is, hey, we needed some work to fill the time and make a little bit of money, that's not quite as motivating. But I would at least understand why I was doing the project. And oftentimes I was just given, here's a project, do it. Um, and those were not the funnest things to work on.
Yeah, for me, it was always data entry. I loosely understood why it was important to go back and like update templates and the content that we had available. But for me, it was like, I knew it and it was in that proposal, and you're just going to tell me to go back to that proposal anyway. So why am I taking all this information out, spending hours like filing it away, squirreling it away somewhere else? But it's actually like a broader organizational thing. It was so other people can get to it. It ultimately, if we did things right and had time to do the process correctly, made us more strategic. But oh man, I really struggled with that in the beginning because I was like, why? What is the purpose of this?
Yeah, so I think as a leader, right, the way to achieve this is to offer regular feedback and show people how their actions and what they're doing connects to the bigger goals of the organization and the bigger goals of their life. And you got to understand what the goals of their life are in order to be able to do that.
And sensing a theme in caring about your people enough to understand what they care about.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you really have to know your people. That's the only way you're going to help them avoid burnout.
Yeah, it's the only way you're going to spot it in them too. So it's kind of
Yeah.
just just get to know them, treat them like people.
Yeah. So the A stands for autonomy. And this is a big one. And I know there's this push for return to office and, leadership's fighting against, hybrid work environments potentially and work from home. And I think there's a misunderstanding of what autonomy means and how easily and quickly that's tied to these ideas of the shift in work over the last few years. But I think what you're trying to help people avoid is not feeling powerless, right? Like they have no control. If I show up to work and am told what to do every minute of every day, I have no control over my day, and that doesn't feel good. So it's finding ways to give them flexibility in decision making, and not make all the decisions for them, and potentially scheduling too, right? How or when I get work done. Um, I'm of the opinion that if people get their job done, I don't really care how or when they do it. It's how or when or how long it takes them is not the important part. It's that it got done. And obviously, if you're working within a project budget, if they're going over that, it's a concern. But I mean, you want your people to feel like they have initiative, can make some decisions for themselves, and get guidance when they need it.
I have so many thoughts on autonomy and the A that it could be an entire episode, and so I'm pinning that because it probably will be. But I think this ties back to mastery, right? And something you just said in that if we feel the need to script out someone's day to that point, every time I talk about flexibility or autonomy in the workplace on LinkedIn, someone inevitably pops up and says, well, if I don't make sure that my people are doing what they need to be doing, then they're going to go work a second job or they're not going to get things done. And I'm like, well, I'm going to call you out on that for being a poor leader. Because what that tells me is that you have not given them something to work toward. You're just giving them tasks, like mindless tasks. You don't trust your people. No one wants to work for someone who doesn't trust them. So I think giving that goal, setting those goals, and then giving people the choice, like you said, to attain those goals, it's pretty simple in my mind. Like, okay, here's our corporate goal for ROI for the year, or whatever. We need to put in X number of proposals to get that, or we have identified these strategic opportunities to do that. Go. Like your people are going to get it done, especially if they know what they're doing and you've given them all the tools that they need to do it.
If you
So
if you've hired the right people, which
if
is
you've
probably a
hired
whole
that,
episode.
that is another, yeah, that's a separate episode. And if you haven't hired the right people, then you'll find out very quickly that they don't fit in this. And some people need a little more structure and some people need less. But that's part of the whole figuring out how people work and how they work together. Yeah, I think we should give people the opportunity to show us who they are before we decide who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to deal with if somebody's going to let you down in that fashion, right? Then as a leader, you have to deal with that. But yeah, I'm with you. Trust somebody until they give me a reason not to. And
Exactly.
uh, I I have plenty to do on my own. I don't need to be in everybody's business telling them what to do also. So
Yeah, no. We all have plenty to do. Like, let me just get through it.
yeah.
But
So I
I
think that idea of powerlessness is really important in this one. And how do you give your employees or have them feel a sense of control over their day and what they're doing and why it's important?
agreed. I just want to throw in like a very specific example if there's like leadership out there going like, well, I don't know how to implement this. I saw this conversation happening on Reddit, so grain of salt. But it was someone talking about how their organization has implemented what they called core hours. So it was like 11 to 4 is when you have to either be online or in the office, whichever one you are. But outside of that, like if you show up at 11 and you want to work until 7, that's on you. If you show up at like 7 a.m. and you want to work until 4, that's fine. You just have to be there for those core hours. If you take a 2-hour lunch, like that's fine as long as you are available during those core hours. But I thought that was a really interesting. I'm curious to see how that works out for that organization. I know I won't get to follow up, but I
I mean, I've
would,
seen core hours, they're usually not that condensed.
yeah.
I've seen them like 9 to 4 or 9 to 3. Uh,
Which is like a traditional workday. That's why I thought this was really interesting because it was like a half a day where everyone needed to overlap. But outside of that, like the people who are not morning people could roll in around lunchtime. So that meant they like got to sleep all morning. Or the people who are morning could like get most of their day done. And then by the time they're done with the core hours, like they're done for the day. I
yeah.
thought that was a really interesting way to flex that. And really, do you need more than 4 hours in a day to overlap with people? I don't. If you put me in 4 hours of meeting in a single day, I'm gonna lose my mind.
Yeah. I think another way you could do that is if you have a task and somebody, you're having somebody help you or do the task for you, maybe you give them some time to kind of plan it out and then have a sit down and be like, okay, here's what I would tweak, from my experience, or, did you forget about this step? Or but they feel in control of the process and it's not do this, then do this, then do this.
I think that's wonderful as well. I think that requires a lot of thoughtfulness and flexibility on us. And again, I'm going to go back to like organizationally, we are so crushing on our teams and our staff that we don't have the time to do stuff like that. And so we need to be intentional and make space to be able to do things like that. And I think companies who do that, who don't overload and like have that constant to do in the background for people and give them the space to think through things and to connect at that level are going to thrive over companies that continue to just pile on because it's been working in the past and just continue to burn out and churn their team.
Yeah. Yeah. So the R, I love this one, being a people person, is for relational work. As humans, we are a tribal species. So we want to connect with other people. And so, social support, teamwork, collaboration is so important. And if people feel isolation in what they're doing, we've talked, I think, in previous episodes about how important community is when it comes to pulling yourself out of burnout. And so this one I really liked. You want to see how your actions at work are impacting other people. And I even dug a little bit deeper on this one. And a suggestion that I found was try to find a way to bring your employees into contact with your clients so that they can see how what they're doing impacts other people, because that will bring stimulation and meaning to their work.
This is something we talk about a lot in proposals. So like when you're trying to figure out your strategy for your proposal, a lot of people are like, oh, the budget's too low or the schedule is too short. But what you're actually looking for is the people behind the problem. Like, how is it going to impact them? So like we like to say that projects don't have challenges because it's just a project, but people do. So like that schedule is going to impact the person running the project or the end users, right? Like if you don't finish the school on time, where do those kids go? So tying that, I love that.
Yeah, and then also how do you create opportunities for meaningful social interaction for people through work, which is a challenge, right? If you're all remote working, that's the benefit to hybrid work or being in the office is there is more social interaction that happens. So either way, right? There's not a right or wrong answer, but if you are going to be fully remote, you have to think about the ways that you're creating opportunity for social interaction for people and be really thoughtful and diligent about it.
Yeah, yeah. As a solo consultant, I feel this one really, really deeply. I tend to very easily slip into isolation. But something as simple as someone reaching out and saying like, "Hey, you want to have a virtual coffee and like chat through this?" Whether it's like chatting through something at work or chatting through just life, like just connecting in that way, really is very rejuvenating. So it doesn't have to be anything big. We don't have to like plan company virtual paint nights, or I've seen companies do like make your own sourdough and they like all get on their they all get on their computers and make sourdough together after getting like these
Yeah.
kits. And I'm like, that's a lot. That's
I've,
awesome, but that's a
I've,
lot.
I've seen some remote cooking opportunities.
Super fun, won't say no, but it doesn't have to be that much. It can just be that like, hey, let's have a conversation. Or Pi started doing co-working. They're silent. You literally just log on to the meeting and you keep working. But like you've got all these other people on the screen with you, like that you've told what you're doing for the hour.
Yeah.
And it's oddly like very like that double body doubling, I think it's sometimes called, is really helpful. It makes you feel not quite so alone because you're very supported. So
Yeah, I did that as well. Open office hours is what I called it. So, whoever was free on the team could jump in. And sometimes if you were working on something and had a question, it benefited everybody else to hear the interaction. And sometimes we just got on and BS'd for a while. So it seemed to be really effective. But even when you're in the office, it can be really an easy habit to fall into of like, oh, I've got all this work I got to get done, and I'm not going to take time to socialize. And it's important that people create,
okay.
that opportunity is created for people, whether they want to or not.
Yes. And not forced on them as an
No,
introvert
not
to be
right.
honest. Like just give me the option and encourage, but don't make me attend a
Yeah.
function.
So the T stands for tolerable demands. So this one was really heavy on, um, not having excessive overtime, not creating conflicting priorities for people. I know that's a huge one in our industry, right? As an engineer, I'm working on 10 projects who all have a deadline on the same day. And how in the world am I going to get that done? Um, also addressing toxic behavior, whether it's from customers or other coworkers. So this one is really good too. So you want people's workloads to be realistic and have clear expectations and make sure people are treated nicely.
I think this one might be the hardest one because we tend to set a standard based on our most productive selves, and we can't be our most productive selves all the time. But that's where a lot of burnout comes from. I'm gonna again talk on the marketing side. You mentioned having 10 projects, right? I'll do it at the same time. Marketing, same thing. We'll have, 5 proposals that someone is handling and they get a sixth one. And because we are proposal professionals, we make it happen. But instead of like coming back down to one or two pursuits at a time, everyone sees that we can handle, 5 or 6. And so that becomes the norm. So it's going to take a lot of courage, I'm going to say, on the part of the organization to assess that workload and to look at not just the output, but the quality of that output and the health of the team doing that output and say, okay, we're going to scale back. Like it might require hiring 1 or 2 extra people to bring that level back down, but to not hold people to their most productive all the time. And they're going to do it to themselves. So it's also very important that the organization like sees through that and helps cut through that.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to look at this one and be like, well, no overtime then. And it's like, no, that's not realistic either, right? So there are going to be times when overtime is needed and warranted. What's important is when it's not, or when people have less than enough to do, that they are given the opportunity to rest and recover so that when the overtime comes again, they are ready and able to step up to that challenge. The burnout comes from, you know, I'm really busy. Now I have downtime. I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about what do I do all day to stay busy. That creates stress internally. I now have not spent any time recovering. Now here comes the overtime again. And it's just this vicious cycle that we find in. And I see that with engineers a lot. And architects when they do have that downtime, the internal stress goes really high, and so they don't tend to take as good of advantage of it as they could. So as leadership, right, it's encouraging them to like, okay, you got a little slow down, like it's cool, take it easy, you're
Right. And
safe.
not contributing to that toxic behavior. Again, personal experience, but I see it a lot in marketing. But I remember working in house and I had like, that overtime period where I worked a crazy number of hours the week before. And so I got to Friday the following week. I hit my hours for the week, even though I'd done overtime the week before. Doesn't spill over. And I tried to leave at 2 o'clock on Friday and I got in trouble because how dare I not be a team player and sit there and do my data entry for the next 3 hours? And I remember that just crushing my spirit, probably because it was, when I was first experiencing burnout for the first time. But it would have been so much more impactful if leadership had looked at me and been like, oh, congratulations on slamming out 6 proposals last week. Good job on getting your last one in this week. Go home, go rest. Like, you're good. We're fine. You'll hit it again next week. But instead, yeah, leadership just saw me as unproductive for that week, not looking at the previous time. So it takes a lot of thoughtfulness and that connection because I don't think anybody understood. Nobody knew that I had done that. Nobody was looking at my timesheet. Because we like to micromanage the butt in the seat, but we don't like to micromanage the past that's informing that. So,
Yeah, I had an employee who was up till 12 o'clock working on a deadline on Wednesday, and I as he was doing it, right, like I was like, I really appreciate you doing this. I hope you can, on Friday cut out early and go get some time for yourself. And then he, the next day I was like, I really meant it. Like Friday, go away. So I had to, reiterate it several times just to make sure that was what they were going to do.
yeah, it's something we're not familiar with. We're told, like, yeah, we support work-life balance. Then it's not always implemented in practice, or it's like, to me as a marketer, if someone had said that, I would have been like, I mean, that's just something you say, but I will be here on Friday. Like,
That's why I
for my,
said it multiple times. And showed appreciation for what he did.
well, that's what I mean. Like, you as the leader took it that step further to make sure he didn't just hear it that one time and be like, okay, he's just being nice to me and saying like,
Yeah.
kudos, good thing. Like you actually reinforced, you acknowledged their achievement, you acknowledged the work that they were putting in towards the higher goal. And then, yeah, hold them, go balance, go rest. That's what leadership really needs to do. There's a lot of work that leadership needs to put in to prevent burnout. It's not a passive thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's also a lot of work that people need to put in to prevent burnout. So it's not a one side is to blame for all this, but there are problems on both sides.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the smart framework, just to summarize, is to find them stimulating work, to create opportunities for mastery, um, give them autonomy to work the way they want to, create relational opportunities at work, and then have tolerable demands on them.
Easy.
Any
Simple.
any last thoughts?
I don't think so. I think we really covered and gave some very actionable tips for anyone looking to proactively prevent burnout in their organization this year, which if you're listening to this, I'm going to ask you to make that a 2025 resolution, whether you are in a leadership position or just an individual. Like Jeff said, it's on both sides. So 2025.
And if you're a leader who's burned out, maybe share this episode with your boss.
And now it's time for burning questions.
All right. So our burning question today comes from a project manager in a medium-sized architecture firm. So their question is, as a leader, how can I tell if my team is just stressed from a big project or if they're experiencing burnout? And the second part of that question is, what should I do differently depending on which situation they're in?
Ooh. I love when we get mail from technical teams. Just throwing that out there. It's not just for marketers. But do you want to? I know you have thoughts. Do you want to field it?
I think there's obviously different levels of stress. And being on a big project can create some acute stress or potentially chronic stress. So I think it's being aware of what those different levels of stress are. And, ultimately burnout comes from when we're under chronic stress for too long. So, um, I think, and even a big project, right, ebbs and flows, where there are going to be times where a lot of work is required and there are going to be times where not much work is happening. So, um, I think it's paying attention to that, you know. I guess I would say, how are they behaving and are they acting like themselves? Which again requires you to know your people. Um, if they're stressed and then they return to themselves, I would say they're not in chronic stress or burnout. But if they're continuing to act in a way that's not usually like them, I would say you're probably teetering more towards the side of chronic stress and potentially burnout. I would say a way to tell if they're stressed or burned out is, do they care about what's happening? Because I think once you get to the point of burnout, right, we've talked about you're exhausted. But there's also this negative attitude towards what you're doing or a lack of care. And then, the other side of it is, are you feeling like you're effective at your job? So when they've kind of given up, or it's that idea of I don't care anymore, I think that's a good sign that they're in burnout. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I was gonna say I don't honestly know if I would treat them differently initially. I think both burnt out and stressed require you to be checking in on them regularly, making sure they feel supported, making sure they understand the value that the work they're putting in has towards the broader project, kind of all the SMART goals that we just talked through. And then, yeah, like you said, if you kind of notch down and can understand like this is burnout and this person is not okay, they've kind of checked out, then I think you need to to kind of go on a more aggressive path to helping them out of that, or they're just going to get worse and worse. And so you need to create space actively for them. And I don't know what that looks like, if it's bringing in someone to help with their workload, or if it's talking through a plan with them to just get through this and then give them space afterward. But really, that's the only difference I would see. Because if it's stress, they'll, like, you have a plan regardless. You show them support regardless. You listen to them regardless. And that's gonna help infinitely, honestly, just showing up for your team.
Yeah, I think trying to, if you're working on a big project and there are periods of high stress, trying to create opportunities for the team to unwind and have fun together can be really powerful. That can help kind of get to the point where you avoid burnout because it shows the people the appreciation of what they're doing. And we recognize that this is a stressful situation and want to help, make sure that we're still having fun and, you know, we still see why we're doing this. And yeah, I think once you get to burnout, I do think a more aggressive approach is required, and there is no one size fits all solution to help pull people out of it. But you know, just recognizing that they're there and caring for them, and hey, we see that you're burned out, but we want to help you get through this. Can mean a lot to people. Whereas
Absolutely.
a lack of awareness that they're burned out or a lack of caring can really make it a lot worse. Or
Yeah.
avoid, head in the sand, avoiding the fact that this person's burned out isn't good either.
Now at that point, you're gonna lose them if you do
Or
nothing.
you're going to
Yeah.
lose something. You're jeopardizing your project
Yes.
uh, because you're not getting their best either anymore.
Right. Right. I really like the idea of giving people something to look forward to. So like if you know that there's going to be a rush or a crazy high period of stress, like planning something afterward, like, all right, we just have to get through this submittal. And then we're all gonna not pizza party, but like we're gonna do something fun, like we're all gonna, I don't know what it is, but
I mean, don't undersell the idea of a good, fun lunch out either, because I had a boss who, anytime we delivered a project as a team, we would all go to lunch. And like that was such a cool, like you had looked forward to the lunch because it was like, man, we now get to blow off steam. We can just let go of that and have some fun and have some laughs and he appreciates what we just did, obviously. So it doesn't have to be this huge thing either. It can be just, hey, let's go to lunch and blow off some steam.
it just needs to be meaningful, I think,
Yeah,
is the important part.
yeah,
Any final thoughts?
I think so. I think, you know, I guess the last thing I would say is stress on a project doesn't have to be bad either. We accomplish a lot of great things in life through stress, as Rachelle and I are well aware of right now. But yeah, stress can be a good thing too if it's embraced and is not prolonged.
Yeah, there's a reason procrastinators thrive at that 11th hour because that stress can really, really help.
Mhm.
Can also be really bad, but
Can be. I think that, if you're avoiding something and that's what's causing you to procrastinate, that's one thing. If you know you're going to get your best work out of yourself by putting yourself in that situation, that's another thing. So,
yeah, that was me waiting to write all of my college essays until the night before they were due because I knew they would be so much better than if I sat down like the week before and like thought through them. Who does that?
all right. Well, a friendly reminder to our listeners, if you have a burning question, you can email it to us at burnoutbanter@gmail.com. Also, again, a reminder to like or subscribe to the podcast so you can get the episodes when they come out and never miss one. Rachelle and I will be giving a keynote talk at SMPS South Regional Conference in Houston at the end of this month, January 30th, on how to craft communication to bridge the marketing subject matter expert divide. And we're also doing a live episode of our podcast, Burnout Banter, at the conference as one of the breakout sessions on the 31st. And lastly, we will also be at SMPS Southwest Regional Conference in Park City in April and SMPS Northeast Regional Conference in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, also in April.
It's conference season, y'all. We'll see you
Yeah.
soon.
Sure is. We're taking the show on the road.
It's our favorite thing to get to interact with all of our listeners.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's good to be back. I enjoyed doing this again. I miss it when we don't do it.
This is my connection. You know, one of my touch points.
Yeah.
We're great.
All right. Well, take care, everybody. We'll see you at the next episode.
See you at the next episode.